1 month after the attack on the Celestial Harmony, the Grand Hall of the Alliance headquarters was filled with people from all across the galaxy. Representatives from every member species sat in the large circular room. The curved walls displayed the flags of all Alliance worlds. At the center stood a simple platform. Han Tai sat in a small room near the Grand Hall. He wore a clean military uniform with his rank insignia polished and bright. His wounds had healed, though some scars would never fade. He looked nervous. "Are you ready?" Dr. G1 asked. She stood beside him, wearing a formal medical uniform. Han shook his head. "I'm a soldier, not a speaker. I don't belong in front of the Alliance Council." "You deserve to be there," G1 said firmly. "Your story needs to be told." The door opened. Ambassador Kroll entered wearing elaborate ceremonial robes. All 4 of his arms were decorated with golden bands. "It's time, Captain Tay," he said. Han stood slowly. The 3 of them walked through the corridor toward the Grand Hall. As they approached, Han could hear the murmur of many voices. Thousands of people waited inside. "So many," he whispered. "All here for you," G1 said, "for the truth." They entered the Grand Hall. The crowd fell silent as Han walked toward the central platform. He could feel all eyes on him: humans, Alderians, Palaxians, Morax, and dozens of other species watched his every step. When Han reached the platform, the head of the Alliance Council, an elderly Palaxian named Varteth, stood up. "Captain Han Tai," Varteth said, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "You stand before the united species of the galaxy. We have gathered to hear your story, the true story of human soldiers in this war." Han took a deep breath and began to speak. His voice was quiet at first, then grew stronger. 3 years ago, I was a normal human, a farmer from a small town in Korea on Earth. When the Void Dominion attacked, I joined the Alliance military, like many humans did. We wanted to help. Han paused, looking around at the silent crowd. 6 months later, our unit was trapped on planet Zarl. The Void forces had better weapons, better armor. We were losing badly. That's when Alliance Command offered us a choice: volunteer for an experimental program or retreat and leave the planet to the enemy. Han rolled up his sleeve, revealing the metal implants in his arm. Many in the audience gasped. 20 of us volunteered. We underwent procedures to enhance our bodies with cybernetic technology. It was painful. 5 didn't survive the process, but those of us who did could fight in ways no one thought possible. Han described the battles they fought, how the enhanced human soldiers pushed back the Void Dominion forces, how they endured conditions that would kill ordinary soldiers, how they kept volunteering for the most dangerous missions because they knew they had the best chance of survival. "We weren't heroes," Han said. "We were just doing what needed to be done." Ambassador Kroll stepped forward. "But they were heroes," he said loudly. "Heroes the Alliance kept secret. Heroes we treated poorly because we didn't know the truth." Kroll turned to face the council. "I saw Captain Tay lift a support beam that would have crushed an Alderian warrior. I saw him stay behind on a dying ship to save others. I saw him face Void soldiers alone to give us time to escape." The Grand Hall was completely silent now. Everyone listened closely. "What I didn't see," Kroll continued, "was the price these humans paid. Their enhancements cause constant pain. They shorten their already brief lives. Yet they volunteered anyway, not because humans are expendable, but because humans are extraordinary." Varteth stood again. "Captain Tay, is what Ambassador Kroll says true? Did you know the cost when you volunteered?" Han nodded. "We all did. We made our choice freely." "Why?" asked Varteth. "Why would you sacrifice so much?" Han looked around the hall. His eyes found G1's. She smiled encouragingly. "Because someone had to," Han said simply. "The Void Dominion threatened all life in the galaxy, not just humans, but every species. We couldn't stand by and watch." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many looked ashamed. Others looked amazed. Varteth raised his hands for silence. "The Alliance Council has made a decision. The classified status of the Human Enhancement Program is hereby removed. The truth will be known throughout the galaxy. The head of the council walked down to the platform where Han stood. In his hands he held a small box. In recognition of the sacrifice made by human soldiers, the Alliance creates a new honor, the Star of Ultimate Sacrifice. Captain Han Tai, you are the first recipient. Varteth opened the box. Inside was a medal shaped like a silver star with a blue center. He placed it on Han's uniform. From this day forward, Varteth announced, no soldier of any species shall be denied proper respect, accommodation, or recognition. The Human Dignity Act is now law throughout Alliance space. The crowd erupted in applause. Han stood tall, though he felt uncomfortable with the attention. After the ceremony, Han found himself in a quiet room with Ji-Wan and Ambassador Kroll. What will you do now? Ji-Wan asked. Han touched the medal on his chest. The war isn't over. The Void Dominion is still out there. You've done enough, Kroll said. More than enough. There are other ways to serve, Ji-Wan suggested. You could teach at the academy, share your experience with new soldiers. Han thought about it. Perhaps. For a while at least. 6 months later, Han stood in front of a classroom at the Alliance Military Academy. 30 young cadets from 12 different species sat before him. Among them were 4 Aldarians, including Ambassador Kroll's youngest son. Welcome to Advanced Tactics, Han said. I'm Captain Han Tai. A young Aldarian cadet raised his hand. Sir, is it true you fought off 10 Void soldiers alone on the Celestial Harmony? Han smiled slightly. The stories get bigger every time I hear them. Another cadet, a human girl, asked, Will you show us your enhancements, Captain? Han rolled up his sleeve, revealing the now familiar metal beneath his skin. The cadets leaned forward, fascinated. The enhancements made me stronger, Han said. But they weren't what made the difference. What did, sir? Asked the Aldarian cadet. Working together, Han replied. Understanding each other, respecting our differences and our similarities. After class, Han walked through the academy garden. Dr. Ji-Wan waited for him there. They had grown close over the past months. She understood his pain better than most. How was class? She asked. Good, Han said. They're young but eager to learn. Ji-Wan smiled. And are you teaching them about the metal in your arms or the strength in your heart? Han laughed softly. Both, I hope. They walked together through the garden toward the small apartment they now shared. Above them, the stars shone brightly in the night sky. Somewhere out there, the war continued. But here, in this moment, there was peace. Han looked up at the stars. His sacrifice had changed things. Humans were no longer seen as lesser beings. They were respected as equals, even admired. All because one day, a human soldier was denied a seat. And the truth shocked everyone. The end. 3 days after the attack, the rescued passengers of the Celestial Harmony gathered on Alliance Space Station 7. The large station orbited around a blue-green planet far from the front lines of the war. It was a safe place, full of shops, homes, and medical facilities. Dr. Ji-Wan sat in the station's medical center, treating minor injuries. Many passengers had been hurt during the escape. None had died thanks to the quick evacuation. But one person was missing. Han Tai Ji-Wan had checked every passenger list, every medical report. No sign of the human soldier who had helped save so many lives. She tried not to think about what that meant. The door to the medical center opened. Ambassador Kroll walked in, his blue skin now back to its normal bright color. He looked different, somehow. Less proud. More thoughtful. Doctor, Kroll said, nodding politely. May I speak with you? Ji-Wan nodded. Of course, Ambassador. I wanted to thank you for your help during the evacuation, Kroll said, and to ask if you have news of the human soldier, Captain Han Tai. Ji-Wan shook her head sadly. No, he wasn't on any of the escape pods. Kroll's 4 eyes blinked slowly. I see. That is unfortunate. He saved my life, the lives of my aides. He was not what I expected. What do you mean? Jiwan asked. I saw him lift a support beam that would have crushed even an Aldarian warrior, Kroll said, and I saw something strange on his shoulder. Metal, beneath his skin. Jiwan remembered the glimpse of metal she had seen when treating Han's wounds. I saw it too. I didn't understand what it was. Before Kroll could respond, the medical center's communication screen lit up. A message flashed across it. Attention. All station personnel. Alliance military vessel approaching. Medical team requested in docking bay 3. Jiwan stood up. I have to go. Duty calls. I will come with you, Kroll said unexpectedly. Perhaps they have news. They hurried to docking bay 3. A small Alliance military ship had just docked. Its hull was damaged with burn marks from energy weapons. As they watched, the ship's door opened. 2 Alliance officers walked out, supporting a third person between them. Ji-Wan gasped. It was Han Tai. He was alive, but barely. His uniform was torn and burned. Blood stained his side. He could hardly stand. Get a medical pod ready, Ji-Wan shouted to the other medical staff. Then she ran to Han. Han, you're alive, she said, scanning him quickly with her medical device. Han looked up, his eyes unfocused. Ji-Wan, you made it. Everyone made it, she assured him. Thanks to you, but how did you survive? Before Han could answer, he collapsed. The officers caught him and placed him on a waiting medical stretcher. Take him to emergency treatment room 1, Ji-Wan ordered. Full scan now. The medical team rushed Han away. Ji-Wan turned to the Alliance officers. What happened? How did you find him? The taller officer, a woman with captain's stripes, answered. We received a distress signal from a small survival pod near the wreckage of the Celestial Harmony. When we arrived, we found Captain Tay floating in space. He had somehow survived for almost 3 days with minimal life support. Impossible, Ambassador Kroll said, who had been listening nearby. No one can survive that long in those conditions, especially not a human. The officer looked at Kroll coolly. Captain Tay is not an ordinary human, Ambassador. What do you mean? Ji-Wan asked. The officer hesitated. That's classified information, but... She looked at their concerned faces. You both saw him in action. You deserve to know. Follow me. The officer led them to a private room near the treatment area. She closed the door and activated a security field. What I'm about to tell you is top secret, she said. The Alliance High Command has kept this information restricted to need-to-know basis. Ji-Wan and Kroll listened carefully. 3 years ago, when the Void Dominion first attacked, the Alliance was losing badly, the officer explained. Their weapons were too advanced, their soldiers too strong. We needed something special to fight them. The Alliance asked for volunteers from all species, soldiers willing to undergo experimental procedures to enhance their fighting capabilities. Many tried. Most failed. The enhancements were too extreme for most bodies to accept. But humans, the officer continued, humans were different. Their bodies adapted in ways no one expected. Where other species rejected the cybernetic enhancements, humans embraced them, changed with them. Captain Han Tay was one of the first volunteers, she said. Nearly 60% of his body has been enhanced with military-grade cybernetic systems. His bones are reinforced with metal. His muscles are supported by synthetic fibers. His lungs and heart have mechanical backups. He can survive conditions that would kill anyone else. Ji-Wan felt shocked. That's why he could lift the beam, why he could survive in space. Yes, the officer confirmed, but the price was high. The pain never fully goes away, and each enhancement shortens their lifespan. Captain Tay may live another 10 years at most. Why would humans agree to this? Ambassador Kroll asked, his voice quiet with shock. To save others, the officer said simply. To protect the Alliance, to give us a chance. But why keep it secret? Ji-Wan asked. Politics, the officer answered with disgust. Some Alliance species feared what humans might become if the enhancements spread beyond military use. Others worried about the ethical implications. So the High Command classified the program. They sent the enhanced human soldiers to the front lines where few would see what they had become. Ambassador Kroll sat down heavily, all four of his hands trembling slightly. All this time, we thought humans were sent to the worst battles, because they were expendable, because they didn't matter. No, the officer said. They were sent because they were the only ones who could adapt quickly enough to survive. A medical alert sounded on Jiwon's communicator. Han is awake, she said. I need to go to him. The treatment room was quiet except for the soft beeping of medical monitors. Han lay on a bed, his chest and shoulder wrapped in healing bandages. Where the bandages didn't cover, Jiwon could see the metal implants beneath his skin. Han opened his eyes when Jiwon approached. Hello, doctor, he said weakly. Hello, soldier, she replied with a small smile. You're quite hard to kill, it seems. Han tried to shrug, then winced. Part of the job. Ambassador Kroll stepped forward, standing beside Jiwon. I owe you an apology, Captain Tay, he said formally. And much more. My life. The lives of my people. No apology needed, Han said. I was just doing my duty. No. Kroll shook his head. It was more than duty. I know the truth now. About you. About what human soldiers have sacrificed for the Alliance. Han's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Jiwon, who nodded. We know, Han, she said gently. About the enhancements. About what you gave up to fight this war. Han closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were clear and direct. It was my choice, he said. All of us volunteers knew what we were doing. The Alliance will know too, Ambassador Kroll said firmly. I will make sure of it. No more secrets. No more treating humans as lesser beings. The truth must be told. Han tried to sit up. Ambassador, the classification is wrong, Kroll interrupted. The Alliance must know what humans have sacrificed. What you have become to save us all. Han looked uncertain, but before he could respond, the door opened. The Alliance officer who had rescued Han entered, along with 3 high-ranking officials. Captain Tay, one official said, it seems your secret is out. Han looked at the fallen beam blocking the corridor. It was made of heavy metal designed to support the ship's structure. Behind it, Ambassador Kroll and his 2 aides waited, their blue faces now pale with fear. Is there another way around? Kroll called through the gap. Han shook his head. Not fast enough. The ship is failing. We don't have much time. The ship shuddered again. More alarms joined the first one, creating a deafening noise. The emergency lights flickered. Han studied the beam. It was too heavy for a normal person to move. But Han was not a normal person anymore. Not after 3 years of war. Stand back, Han told the Aldarians. I'm going to try to lift it. Kroll's 4 eyes widened. Impossible. Even an Aldarian couldn't lift that alone. Han ignored him. He took off his jacket and tossed it aside. Then he bent down, placed his hands under the beam, and took a deep breath. With a grunt, Han began to lift. The muscles in his arms bulged. His face turned red with effort. Sweat broke out on his forehead. The beam didn't move. Han paused, breathing hard. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if making a decision. Then he bent down again. This time when Han lifted, something changed. There was a faint humming sound barely audible over the alarms. The veins in Han's neck and arms seemed to glow slightly blue beneath his skin. Slowly, the heavy beam began to rise. The Aldarians watched in shock as the human soldier lifted the massive metal beam high enough to create a gap. Quickly, Han said through gritted teeth. Crawl under. The Aldarians didn't need to be told twice. They dropped to the floor and scrambled under the beam. Ambassador Kroll went first, followed by his aides. As the last Aldarian passed through, Han's strength seemed to fade. The beam slipped from his grasp and crashed back to the floor with a loud bang. Han leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. His shirt had torn at the shoulder, revealing a strange metallic gleam beneath his skin. What? What are you? Ambassador Kroll asked, staring at Han's shoulder. Before Han could answer, another explosion rocked the ship. This one was closer and stronger. The floor beneath them tilted. No time, Han said, straightening up. We need to get to the escape pods. Follow me. They ran through the corridors, Han leading the way. Other passengers rushed past them in panic. Twice they had to change direction when passages were blocked by damage. Finally, they reached the escape pod bay. Several pods had already launched. Ji-won stood by one of the remaining pods, looking anxiously at the entrance. Her face lit up when she saw Han. You made it, everyone inside, Han ordered. The escape pod was small. It could fit 6 people comfortably, 8 in an emergency. There were already 5 passengers inside, Ji-won and the 2 Aldarians who had been with her, plus 2 frightened-looking Moraks. Ambassador Kroll and his 2 aides made 8. There was no room for Han. Where will you go? Ji-won asked, realizing the problem. There are other pods, Han said. I'll find one. Another explosion shook the ship. This one was so close that pieces of the ceiling fell around them. There's no time, Han said. Go. Launch now. Wait, Ambassador Kroll said suddenly. The human should take my place. Everyone stared at the Aldarian in shock, but Ambassador... One of his aides began. Kroll held up one of his 4 hands. He saved our lives. I saw what he did. No ordinary being could have lifted that beam. Han shook his head. My job is to protect civilians. Get in the pod, Ambassador. The ship lurched violently. A computer voice announced, critical failure in main engine, complete ship failure in 3 minutes. There's no time to argue, Han said. Get in and launch. I'll find another way. Reluctantly, the Aldarians entered the escape pod. Ji-won hesitated at the door. I'll be fine, Han assured her. Go. Ji-won reached out and squeezed his hand. Find us later. She entered the pod and the door closed behind her. Moments later, the pod launched, shooting away from the dying ship. Han turned and ran back into the corridor. Most of the escape pods would be gone by now, but there might be emergency survival pods near the bridge. The ship was falling apart around him. Support beams had collapsed in many places. Electrical fires burned along the walls. The air was getting thin as the life support systems failed. Han ran through the chaos, helping other passengers along the way. He directed a lost Palaxian family to a pod bay on Deck B. He carried an injured Morax child to safety. All the while, his own chance of escape grew smaller. Finally, Han reached the bridge. The captain and most of the crew had already evacuated. Only a few emergency workers remained, trying to keep the ship together long enough for everyone to escape. You need to go, Han told them. The ship is lost. 1 more minute, said a Palaxian engineer. We're keeping the last pods operational for the stragglers. Han helped the remaining crew finish their work. Then they all ran for the last escape pod bay. There was 1 pod left. It was small, designed for the bridge crew in emergencies. Everyone, in, Han ordered. The 4 crew members looked at the tiny pod. It was meant for 4 people at most. What about you? Asked the Palaxian engineer. Han shook his head. I'll find another way. There is no other way, the engineer argued. This is the last pod. Suddenly, a new alarm sounded. The computer voice spoke again. Warning. Void boarding craft detected. Enemy forces entering Deck A. The crew members looked at Han with fear in their eyes. Go, Han said firmly. I'll hold them off. That's suicide, the engineer protested. Han smiled slightly. I've faced worse odds. Reluctantly, the crew entered the pod. As the door closed, the Palaxian gave Han a respectful salute. Han returned it. The pod launched, leaving Han alone on Biu, the dying ship. Han turned and headed toward Deck A. If Void forces were boarding, they would try to capture the ship's data cores. Han couldn't let that happen. Too many Alliance secrets were stored there. As he walked, Han reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was a military-grade detonator. Every soldier in the front lines carried one. A last resort. The Corridors were empty now. Everyone had escaped or died. Han was alone with the enemy. He reached the entrance to Deck A and waited. Soon he heard the heavy footsteps of Void soldiers. They were coming. Han took a deep breath and prepared himself for his final stand. As he did, the torn fabric of his shirt shifted, revealing more of his shoulder. The metal beneath his skin wasn't just a small plate. It seemed to run deeper, connecting to other metal parts within his body. Han wasn't just a human soldier. He was something more. The first Void soldier appeared around the corner. Tall, with black armor and glowing red eyes. It saw Han and raised its weapon. Han smiled. Then he attacked. The alarm continued to blare throughout the celestial harmony. Red emergency lights flashed in the hallway where Han and Dr. Jiwan stood. "Are you sure it's the Void Dominion?" Jiwan asked, her voice shaking slightly. Han nodded. His face had changed. The tiredness was gone, replaced by focus and alertness. That alarm pattern is specific to Void ships. I've heard it too many times. The ship's speaker system crackled to life. "Attention all passengers, this is Captain Mira speaking. We have detected a Void scout ship in our vicinity. This is not a drill. Please remain calm and stay in your current locations until further instructions." Passengers began to pour out of the dining hall, their faces showing fear and confusion. The Aldarian officials pushed their way through the crowd, Ambassador Kroll in the lead. "Make way. Important diplomatic personnel coming through," Kroll shouted, using all 4 of his arms to clear a path. Han watched them with a calm expression. Then he turned to Jiwan. "You mentioned checking my wounds. Is the medical bay far?" Jiwan blinked in surprise. "You still want to go to the medical bay? Now?" "It's as good a place as any to wait," Han said. "And it might be safer than the hallways if things get worse." Jiwan nodded. "It's this way. Follow me." They walked quickly through the crowded hallways. Twice the ship shuddered as its shields absorbed energy blasts from the Void scout ship. Each time Han steadied Jiwan with a firm hand on her shoulder. The medical bay was empty when they arrived. The other medical staff had likely been called to emergency stations. Jiwan locked the door behind them. "Sit here," she said, pointing to an examination table. Han sat down slowly, wincing as he did so. Jiwan noticed and frowned. "Take off your jacket, please," she said, grabbing a medical scanner from a nearby table. Han removed his military jacket. Jiwan gasped when she saw what was underneath. Han's simple white shirt couldn't hide the extensive scarring on his arms and neck. Some wounds were still healing, covered with medical patches. "How are you even standing?" Jiwan asked, running the scanner over his body. The scanner beeped and displayed results on a small screen. Jiwan's eyes widened as she read them. 3 broken ribs partially healed. 2nd-degree plasma burns across 30% of your torso. Nerve damage in your left shoulder and... She looked up at Han. "Signs of neural shock from Void weapons. You should be in a medical stasis pod, not walking around." Han shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Human medical care on the front lines is basic. We heal when we can, fight when we must." Jiwan shook her head and began preparing medical supplies. "I'm going to treat what I can. This might hurt." As Jiwan worked on his injuries, Han told her about the war. His voice was quiet but clear. He spoke of the brutal battles against the Void Dominion, how human soldiers were often sent to the most dangerous fronts. How many didn't come back? "Why are humans always sent to the worst battles?" Jiwan asked as she applied a healing gel to the burns on his back. "We're considered expendable," Han said simply. "Humans live short lives compared to most other species, and there are many of us willing to fight." "That's not right," Jiwan said, anger in her voice. Han smiled slightly. "It's just how things are." The ship's speaker crackled again. "Attention, all passengers. The Void scout ship is maintaining distance but has not left the area. All security personnel report to your stations. All passengers should proceed to their pods until further notice." Jiwan finished treating Han's wounds. "That, should help with the pain. But you need proper medical care when we reach the next station." "Thank you," Han said. He put his jacket back on and stood up carefully. "I should get back to my pod." I'll walk with you, Ji-won said. My quarters are on Deck C2. As they left the medical bay, they noticed the hallways were quieter now. Most passengers had returned to their pods. But up ahead, a group of Aldarians stood arguing with a ship security officer. It's Ambassador Kroll and his group, Ji-won whispered. They're supposed to be in the diplomatic section on Deck A. Han and Ji-won approached slowly. The security officer looked stressed. I understand your concern, Ambassador, but Deck A has been sealed off due to its proximity to the ship's shields. It's standard procedure during potential combat situations. This is outrageous, Ambassador Kroll shouted. Where are we supposed to go? I demand appropriate accommodations. All emergency guest quarters on Deck B are full, the security officer explained. We can place you in standard pods on Deck C or D temporarily. Standard pods like common passengers. Kroll looked disgusted. Unacceptable. Han stepped forward. Excuse me. Everyone turned to look at him. The Aldarians' faces showed recognition, followed by disdain. You, Kroll said. The human from the dining hall? Han nodded. Yes, I couldn't help overhearing your problem. I have a suggestion. The security officer looked relieved that someone else was talking to the angry ambassador. Go ahead. The recreation room on Deck C is currently unused. It has comfortable seating in private areas. It could be converted for temporary diplomatic use. The security officer thought for a moment, then nodded. That could work. Thank you, Captain. Ambassador Kroll looked surprised that Han had offered a solution. He stared at the human soldier for a long moment. Very well, he finally said. Lead us to this recreation room. Han and Ji-won guided the Aldarians to Deck C. The recreation room was large and comfortable, with several separate seating areas. This will do for now, Ambassador Kroll said stiffly. He looked at Han again, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. You are not what I expected, human. Before Han could respond, the ship suddenly lurched violently to one side. The lights went out completely. Then the dim emergency lighting came on. The ship's speaker system came to life again, but this time the captain's voice sounded urgent and afraid. All passengers, this is an emergency. The void ship has been joined by a larger vessel. Our shields are failing. Proceed immediately to the nearest escape pods. This is not a drill. I repeat, proceed immediately to the nearest escape pods. Panic spread across Ambassador Kroll's face. Escape pods? This is unacceptable. Han's expression turned serious again. He looked at Ji-won. Do you know where the nearest escape pod bay is from here? Ji-won nodded. End of this deck, left corridor. Han turned to the Aldarians. Follow us, stay close. As they left the recreation room, they could hear panicked shouts from all directions. The emergency lighting flickered ominously. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. A distant explosion sound echoed through the metal walls. We need to hurry, Han said. His voice calm despite the chaos. The Void Dominion doesn't take prisoners. They moved quickly through the darkened hallways. Other passengers ran past them, adding to the confusion. Han stayed at the front of their small group, guiding them with confidence despite having been on the ship for less than a day. As they turned into the final corridor leading to the escape pods, a loud groaning sound came from above them. Han looked up just as a large ceiling support beam cracked and began to fall. Look out, he shouted, pushing Ji-won and the nearest Aldarian back. The beam crashed down, missing them by inches, but now it blocked the corridor separating Han from Ji-won and the others from Ambassador Kroll and 2 of his aides, who had been walking behind. Are you all right? Han called through the narrow gap under the fallen beam. Yes, came Ambassador Kroll's shaky voice. But we cannot get through. Han looked at Ji-won. Take them to the escape pods. I'll find another way around for the ambassador and his people. But Ji-won started to protest. Go, Han said firmly. That's an order. Ji-won hesitated, then nodded. Be careful. As Ji-won led her group away, Han turned back to the trapped Aldarians. Ambassador Kroll's usually blue face had turned pale with fear. Don't worry, Han said through the gap. I'm coming to get you. The large metal doors of the transport ship Celestial Harmony slid open with a soft hiss. Captain Hante stepped inside, his tired eyes taking in the bright lights and clean walls. After 3 years of war, the clean air felt strange in his lungs. Han carried a small bag over his shoulder. It held everything he owned now. His uniform was clean but worn at the edges. Dark circles hung under his eyes. A long scar ran from his right temple down to his jaw. It was just one of many marks the war had left on him. "Identification, please," said the check-in robot. Its voice was flat and cold. Han pulled out his military ID card. The robot scanned it and beeped. "Captain Hante, human. Alliance Military Forces. You are assigned to Deck C, Pod 17. Welcome aboard the Celestial Harmony." Han nodded and walked past the robot. His legs felt heavy. He had not slept in 3 days. The last battle against the Void Dominion had been brutal. Many good soldiers had died. Han had made it out alive, but just barely. The ship was full of passengers from all over the galaxy. Tall blue Aldarians with their forearms moved in groups, talking in their singing language. Small green Morax hopped quickly through the halls. Feathered Palaxians stood tall and proud. And among them all walked a few humans, looking small and plain next to the colorful aliens. Han made his way to Deck C. He found Pod 17 and placed his bag on the small bed. The room was tiny but clean. Han sat down on the bed and closed his eyes. He would rest for just a minute before going to get food. When Han opened his eyes again, 2 hours had passed. His stomach growled loudly. He had not eaten real food in days. The military rations during the retreat had been low. He stood up, feeling the pain in his back and legs. The doctors had done what they could, but some wounds were still healing. Han walked to the dining hall on Deck B. The large room was filled with tables and chairs. Most seats were already taken. The smells of different foods filled the air. Han's stomach growled again. He got in line and received a tray of food. It wasn't much, some protein cubes, vegetable mash, and a cup of water, but it looked better than anything he had eaten in months. Han looked around for an empty seat. There, in the corner, was a table with one empty chair. 4 Aldarian officials sat around it eating and talking. Han walked over slowly. "Excuse me," he said. "May I sit here?" The Aldarians stopped talking. They looked at Han with cold eyes. "This seat is taken," said one of the Aldarians. He was larger than the others, with bright blue skin and gold marks on his face. A name tag on his fancy clothes read Ambassador Kroll. Han looked at the empty chair. "It seems free to me. I won't be long." Ambassador Kroll's face darkened. "I said it is taken. We are expecting another member of our delegation." Han stood still. He was too tired to argue, but too hungry to leave. A tall, bird-like alien in a ship uniform walked over. It was a Palaxian. Steward named Rith, according to his name tag. "Is there a problem here?" Rith asked, his feathers slightly raised. "This human is disturbing our meal," said Ambassador Kroll. "We are important officials from Aldaria. We cannot be expected to dine with a common soldier, especially a human one." Han felt his face grow hot, but he kept his expression calm. This was nothing new. Humans were still new to space travel compared to other species. Many of the older races looked down on them. The steward turned to Han. "I'm sorry, sir, but I must ask you to find another seat." Han looked around the dining hall. There were no other empty seats. "There are no other seats," Han said quietly. The steward looked uncomfortable. "Then perhaps you could take your meal back to your pod, or wait until later when the dining hall is less crowded." Han looked down at his food. He was so hungry and his pod was 5 decks away. By the time he got there, the food would be cold. "I can stand and eat in the corner," Han said. "I won't bother anyone." The Aldarians whispered among themselves. Ambassador Kroll smiled slightly, satisfied with Han's retreat. Han moved to the far corner of the dining hall. There was a small ledge where he could place his tray. He ate standing up, his back against the wall. His legs hurt. His wounds from the last battle throbbed with pain, but he had endured worse, much worse. From across the room, a young woman watched Han. She wore the white and blue uniform of a medical officer. The name tag on her uniform read, Dr. Ji-won. She frowned as she watched the human soldier eat his meal while standing in the corner. Other passengers glanced at Han, too. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others stared openly, curious about the human soldier with battle scars who ate alone in the corner. Han ignored them all. He focused on his food, eating slowly, to make it last. Real food, even simple ship food, was better than military rations, and standing here was better than being in the mud and blood of the battlefield. When he finished eating, Han placed his tray in the return slot and headed back toward the door. As he walked past the Alderian's table, he noticed the fifth chair was still empty. There had never been another person coming to join them. In the hallway outside the dining hall, Han stopped and leaned against the wall. He felt dizzy. The doctors had warned him not to push himself too hard. His body was still healing, but he had to get back to his pod before he collapsed. Han started walking toward the lift that would take him back to Deck C. Behind him, the dining hall door opened again. "Excuse me, soldier, wait, please." Han turned around. It was the medical officer who had been watching him, Dr. Ji-won. She hurried toward him, concern on her face. "Are you all right?" "You look pale," she said. Han straightened his back. "I'm fine. Doctor, thank you for your concern." "You're not fine, I can see you're in pain," Ji-won said. "I'm the ship's civilian medical officer, let me help you." Han hesitated. He wasn't used to people offering help, especially not on this ship where humans seemed unwelcome. "I need to check those wounds," Ji-won said. "From the way you're standing, I can tell something isn't right." Before Han could answer, the ship suddenly lurched to one side, the lights flickered. Han automatically reached out to steady Ji-won as she stumbled. A loud alarm began to sound throughout the ship. "What's happening?" Ji-won asked, her eyes wide. Han's face grew serious. He knew that alarm sound. He had heard it too many times during the war. "We're under attack," he said quietly. "The Void Dominion has found us."